In this segment, Patrick, we have a special guest. Her name is Tashika Witter Francis. She's joining us all the way from New Jersey, but you may know her as the voice of Sunset Serenade in 2010 to 2014, if I'm not mistaken.
And that used to held on a Friday.
Friday afternoons, yes. So she is a licensed marriage and family therapist and a mental health counselor. And she's here to clarify for us a little bit as to why your family is how it is and why mine is how it is.
And to see if what I was saying earlier that I am right.
Well, let us see. Sister Francis, welcome to the program. How are you doing?
Having me.
And how are you dealing with COVID in New Jersey at this time?
Well, as you know, New Jersey is one of those states that has the highest numbers, among the states with the highest numbers, but we're doing well. We're taking the necessary precautions, and they're still in somewhat of a lockdown for the state. They're opening up slowly, but we're doing well. Thank you so much for asking.
Please keep safe.
Just one quick question before we actually get into it. Like for COVID now, right, and I am locked in, my mental condition, what advice would you give to me? Briefly, what advice would you give?
For one, you definitely have to tap into the resources that will make you relaxed and not so stressed out, right? Find things, games, activities, fun things to do with your family. You have a new one on board I was overhearing.
That's his special guest.
That's his guest. You can always spend time doing new things and things that you love. So the foods that you would love to cook before that you didn't get the time to do, the games you love to play, the pampering that you want to give, the self-care you didn't have the time to do, now is the time.
They say my wife should pamper me a lot then, right?
And you should pamper her, Patrick,
no,
isn't it?
My wife should pamper
she
me
did
a lot.
not. She did not. Sister Witter Francis. So the topic at hand this afternoon is personality clashes. Do you know your family? And I was saying earlier that I know what my husband's personality type is, and I know that at least one of our children is like him. And the other younger one, is middle child, is like me, and I'm yet to decide where the third one lies. Patrick had a similar situation. But join us in the conversation in sharing with us now, how is it that as a family, what are some of the challenges that can arise because of personality and temperament changes, not changes, but because those remain constant. They tend to remain constant. And what should you, who is even in your dating, premarital, and you have met that person who you believe is the one, but you see some things in their temperament or their personality that you're not quite sure if you want to live with. How do we work through all of that?
All right, let us break it down bit by bit, right? As you said, right, the temperament is with you for life. It's like it's innate, right? Unlike your aspects of your personality that can be modified and, adjusted to fit a particular situation. I also want us to know from, the initial stage as well that your temperament also, a lot of persons when they learn of their temperament, which each of them have both positive and negative, when the negative side comes up, they'll be like, oh, it's just my temperament, right? So we want to understand that in keeping with scriptures, God can perfect that which concerns us. So there are aspects of our temperament that, yes, can be modified, the negative ones especially, right? So we're not going to get stuck in the because I'm sanguine, and the flip side to that is that, I'm forgetful, or I don't keep appointments, or I'm always late. I'm going to stick to that, right? We don't want to, as well as we don't want to say, oh, I am choleric. I cannot date a guy who is sanguine, because that's just going to throw me off. We're not going to mesh at all. In fact, recent research is showing where actually almost any temperament can blend, right? So it's not to go out searching for somebody who, prior to this, they were saying, okay, you have a nice blend between phlegmatic and sanguine. You have a nice blend between the choleric and the melancholic. you can have serious clashes with all the blend, and you can have the similarities that do work, right? So when you're dating, if you're just going out there to seek somebody who is opposite, as they said before,
Opposites attract.
opposite does attract in the male female sense of the word.
Yes,
Right? And we want to keep it that way spiritually,
Yes.
Lord. But
That's right.
as it relates to our temperaments, though, you can have two sanguines that do very well in their relationship and two cholerics, right? Because it boils down to understanding each other, learning to communicate in marriage, and being mindful of the flaws. And as you said earlier, usually you're not stuck in one temperament. You do have kind of a blend. So you can be sanguine with a touch of phlegmatic, because as you know, phlegmatics, they are, they're calm. At the same time, they're very family oriented. Right? They're very family oriented, and you have a blend of both because you're a family therapist and you love that, but they're still out there and extroverted, and you love socializing with people, right? But the crux of it, as you said earlier, is understanding. That's a key principle. Understanding who your family members are and where they fall in the personality type, right? By having this understanding, it will help you to communicate better. And some of the conflicts that you normally see. One psychologist says that usually within about 10 months of your marriage, when you have different temperaments, it's kind of rears its ugly head and you start the conflicts there. And if that isn't resolved within 2 years going into 4, then some persons decide to divorce for them. It's very interesting because,
Wow.
What were you saying?
I just said, wow.
That was actually Dr. Stephen Stancy who actually said that, though. He's a psychologist. Because really, as with a lot of issues in your marriage, it is understanding why a person is fundamentally who they are, right? And how do you work around that? And what makes you comfortable or uncomfortable? So you may start out, so let me use myself, for example. I am, based on the results from the test, I'm sanguine.
Yes.
Right? Based on my husband's results, he's phlegmatic, right? He's a more structured person, likes to plan things, right? He's very family oriented and likes structure to his life a lot. I like making plans, but I'm more spontaneous, right? I will get up today and say, I want
That's
to
you.
That's me.
right? I will get up today and say, oh, I want to go to New York or Connecticut this weekend. He likes to plan and say, okay, if we're going to Connecticut, we're going to go through the polls, we're going to have to budget for this amount, etc. And I'm like, let's go.
Yeah.
And that in itself can cause a conflict if, as husband and wife, you don't know how to work that through, because the wife may say, oh yeah, so everything's about money, money, money for you.
And plan.
And then he may say, well, all you want to do is just spend the money and you're just a spendthrift, and then that leads to other conflict if you don't know how to work that through.
Perfect. Exactly. Right? And if you do not over time understand your partner and understand what your partner needs and your needs as well, so you both can balance, because before now, when I had engagements, I'm like, okay, I was speaking engagement here, there. And I'm like, there, I have a speaking engagement. But I have something on that day too. So imagine if we're not thinking how the conflicts could arise. So I have developed the habits, which one of my weaknesses would be to be so spontaneous that you take on an engagement and you didn't speak with your partner, and that causes a conflict. So I started saying, let me speak with my husband first, and then I'll get back to you.
Yeah.
That's me.
That's a classic example as to how you can understand that your temperament doesn't have to cause a conflict in your relationship. And that's where communication and understanding comes into play, right? Which is why they're saying you can have two sanguines who are spontaneous people, but at the same time, they learn to sync over time and understand that, okay, even though you're sanguine and I'm sanguine and we just get up and go, we still have to have some form of structure in our lives. So we look at the negatives and you try to balance it off with the positives.
How do you, as a parent now, in realizing who your child's personality is after a while. So, for example, in my home, my older daughter is like my husband. She has my husband's personality, very strong-willed, doesn't listen readily, has her own mind, want to get things done her way. And I call her, and she's always coming and never comes unless I become very. How do I parent such a child that I don't become overburdening or abusive or not allow her to grow and blossom in how God has created her? I don't want to stunt her growth, but I want her to realize that she needs to be respectful of everybody in the home.
That's a very good one. All right, so um, 3 patterns of temperament in children. Understanding your children is the easy child, the difficult child, and the slow to warm up type of child, right? And based on how you describe your daughter, not labeling, but she could easily fall on the difficult one because you call her, she may not come the same time, etc. Right? What we have to do now, we go back to the word communication, go back to the word understanding, right? Create that understanding between you and your daughter. You have to have that sit down with your daughter to help her to understand that I notice these behaviors, but these are causing a conflict or a difficulty in our relationship. And we have to find some way to work on it, right? You could understand that maybe sometimes you call her and she's in the middle of something, right? And she wants a few more minutes. But you can say to her, sweetheart, if you know you're in the middle of something, you need a few more minutes, just come to me and say, Mommy, finish this in 20 minutes and then we can come back and get to the house. It really boils up because she's not going to get up and change her temperament overnight, right? You want to modify the things that you see that are becoming potential problems, right? So having that sit down, sometimes you have a family moment, family talks, which is very important. I don't know how much we facilitate that in our culture. But family talks and family meetings are important for persons to lay out there. I know you're this type of person. I know you like when you're watching TV, no interruptions, but know that when mommy calls, it's important most of the time, right? So I want you to respond in a certain way, and you help your child to understand how you'd like the child to respond or else, right? And what are the consequences for choosing to disobey when I call you, or when something important needs to be done and you do not follow through with it. So you're teaching the child responsibility, even though their temperament or their reaction to your rules or discipline is not in keeping with what you do. So one thing they always say, learning your child's temperament is important because it helps you to anticipate what
to expect.
What to expect.
One question.
Go ahead.
Is it wrong to treat each child the same way in terms of disciplinary action or otherwise? Because we do understand that each child is born with a different temperament. But oftentimes parents tend not to treat one less than the other. But at the same time, there's 2 children in the house with 2 different temperament, 2 different behavioral patterns. Should we treat each of them on the same level? Or should we understand them and then treat them accordingly?
So you're asking if we should praise them the same way and punish them the same way?
Or should
Good
we treat
question.
them differently?
Never thought about that.
Their temperament.
Just as our fingerprints differ, our children differ. And you have to relate to them on different levels. You as a parent, you definitely have to be mindful that you're not treating one better than the other, so to speak, right? Because if you're being biased in your treatment, then the children will pick up on it and it will cause further conflicts. But, all right, so I'm spanning a little bit into the 5 love languages for children, right? And this involves, receiving gifts, words of affirmation, physical touch, etc. Say, for example, my son, he loves physical touch and he's just 3, right? He loves to hug and hug up mommy and just rub his head against you, just sleep on your shoulder, etc., right? Research shows that a child whose love language is physical touch, if you slap that child, it means so much harm to the child than a child whose love language is receiving gifts.
Wow.
Is that's a healthy? Is that healthy?
Healthy what? To slap your child?
No, in terms of that physical touch, is that healthy?
Yeah, man, physical touch is healthy. Remember, that's a whole different presentation. Good touch, bad touch, that's different. But physical touch is just hugging your child, holding their hands, they lift you up, they rub their forehead on you, they fall asleep on your shoulder. They get comfort from just being close to you. It's very, very, very healthy. In fact,
Yeah.
we all need the 5 love languages to really be healthy relationships, right? But I was just using an example, a typical example where you have one child whose love language is physical touch, and you slap that child. It's gonna be so detrimental to them. They're gonna feel as if you really don't love and appreciate them any at all, as if you give them, as opposed to if you give them a timeout in the naughty corners, for example, right? So you treat each child different. Each child, that's why you have to understand your child. You have a child who is slow to eat breakfast or slow to get their bags for school, and you have another child who's
Super proud.
I'm seeing my family dynamics as you speak.
right. They're ready to go, etc. Imagine if you keep punishing the child who is slow to eat their breakfast or slow to grab their bag. How will that child feel over time? Right? And that's a part of the temperament of the child that's building right there. Right? So you have to understand your children and punish them according to their age, their stage of development, and even their very temperament. Hard parent, yes, but it's something that we have to develop so we can have a great understanding and reduce the conflicts in our household.
Wow.
Appreciating who you are.
We're going to discuss that in segment 3.
Segment 3.
Yes, we're going to discuss that in part 3.
Oh, sorry.
Yes, so we're going to take a break at this time, Mr. Francis. We're going to another special feature, and we're going to pick up right on Patrick's point of appreciating who you are within the family segment, and how as a family we can blend and be nutritious as a fruit basket with every fruit in there, but when we come together we are one happy family.
Yes.
So we're going to break at this time for a special feature, and then we come right back to our special guest in closing of our Pillow Talk. Welcome back to our final segment of Family Focus for today. We hope you have been enjoying today's program because it has indeed been an interesting conversation. Have you learned anything?
Yes, and I'm hoping, I'm learning, and I'm hoping that those who are online, I'm praying that you are enjoying and being enthused of what has been said and learning as well. And we're going to dig a little deeper. We have been looking on the mother and father side of family. We're going to look at the single parent aspect of it now. So we're going to turn back now to Dr. Witter.
Not doctor.
All right, I'm very sorry. Don't worry.
I think you're mentioning the fact that we just had Doctor's Corner. Praise the Lord. Yes.
You're getting there. Don't worry.
I think he's getting confused because we just had
a section with Doctor's
Corner.
Doctor's Corner. So I'm sorry. So this segment now, we're in the final segment, and one very important question. We have the parent aspect of it. We will only have like the mother alone,
or the father alone,
or
the typical Jamaican setting where it's grandparents who are raising grandchildren. So there's this whole generation gap.
So let us look at the single parent aspect of it now.
So, and in this segment, we'll be looking at how do we support and affirm each other, even especially in these type of families that are prevalent, because the statistic shows that families are 70% of all Jamaican families. So we have been focusing, as you said, on the nuclear family, but the majority of our society may not be able to link into our conversation, if you realize what I'm talking about.
So we don't want to just synchronize it in one direction. We want to widen our scope.
And how even in this family where one parent or even both parents, if it's a grandparent who is growing or taking care of the children, how do we appreciate each other and allow our families to blossom as God intended?
Over to you.
Well, actually what we were looking at earlier, we're kind of understanding the different temperaments and how they span out in relationships as a whole, right? Let us just quickly go back. You spoke about type A, B, C, and of the personalities type, and that fleshes into four temperaments: is sanguine, choleric, melancholic, and phlegmatic, right?
Phlegmatic, yes.
The sanguine being sociable, people oriented, and energetic, and the choleric being uh, critical, more likely bossy, the do it now kind of people, right? The melancholic thinks over everything and takes a while to make decisions and prefer to kind of be alone, while the phlegmatic is family oriented, kind, quiet, and outgoing, as you said earlier, right? When you think about that as parents, for your parents, imagine a parent who is, say, for example, choleric. Do this now, right? And a single parent person. Single parent who is frustrated, want things done now. A child has a different temperament. Say, for instance, a sanguine child who is a little, or some of the negative traits, they say they're not time oriented, nonchalant or whatever. And you have that do it now versus the nonchalant. Can you imagine the type of conflict that will take place in that home?
Yep.
Right? There's this bossy and the blurred lines of communication right there. That relationship between mother and child can become sour, and a child can feel unloved because my mother just wants to tell me what to do and don't listen to me, etc. Right? And then we look at the hinge in the extended family. When you have the conventional type of melancholic kind of hinge on the conventional type of pairing, wanting things done the old-fashioned way, etc., and a child with a different temperament who is seeing things, technologically driven, takes time to get things done. You can almost imagine so far the type of conflicts that will take place, right? How we can help these families is to, as we said, communicate, teach communication strategies. Not everyone was born with the ability to communicate effectively, right? So this sanguine child needs to understand that, okay, mommy is bossy. How do I deal with when mommy is bossy? When is mommy angry, or when is she just being direct? Get your schoolwork done, or you've been playing too long. Come on now and clean the house, right? And how do I respond to my mother that way? And when does mommy know to just calm down, give the child a few more minutes to play with her friends? It's not yet even close to sunset. She just came in from school, did all her house chores. Let her come in a little bit and play a little bit more and come in. How do we help these persons to understand each other? The single parent who's frustrated, because as a single parent, you're taking all the responsibilities by yourself. Some single parents are working 2 jobs just to make ends meet, the school fees. I have to come home and cook and clean and do everything to make sure the child gets the best. And in some communities, we have some communities where the water, the electricity, and everything is not so readily available for some. So understand the frustration, and that single parent who may be choleric, the do it now type of single parent. It's easy for that single parent to just vent. The child is not doing things that they're supposed to do, not following through with instructions. So that can cause a lot of tension and conflict in the family, right? You have the extended family where you have a lot of persons in the household, right? Different persons having different temperaments, wanting the same results from their different temperaments. And families are complex, and we all have the type of personalities or temperaments in the families where they're very critical, like the cholerics. So negative things towards you, right? And persons take offense to the negativity and the criticisms, and that breaks down relationship in families and causes persons to want to avoid each other. Or when you're having that wedding that you're planning and there's some person that you don't put on the wedding list, because there's some out there with their sanguine personality that between the dress and everything else that they're coming to your wedding with is an embarrassment.
They have nothing on, the bride has nothing on them. They have totally overshadowed the whole thing.
How do you understand these dynamics? And these are all how temperaments come into play. We can support each other by avoiding criticisms in the family. Even if somebody's slow, you don't say, oh, she's so slow, man. Look at your brother, especially with the comparisons. We tend to do that with our children a lot. Your brother did this way, you do it, you so slow. Your brother did this.
Yeah.
You understand? So there's a lot of comparisons. So one way to support each other is to avoid the criticism and the comparisons in your family relationship. Help each other out, right? It's good to help each other to grow. So if you see that as Christians, as Bible believers, if you realize a family member is not meeting a certain standard, you try to help them out based on their personality. They're missing out on something. Being easygoing or laid back is not necessarily the best thing, because at times these persons procrastinate. They procrastinate for Bible study. They procrastinate to get assignments done. Right? They procrastinate when they should plan an event or go to somewhere they may be late, etc. So in these instances, we want to support each other by knowing each other's weaknesses and trying to see how we can help each other as family members to build each other up. As parents, right? We know you have some children who are, Jamaicans would say, fidgety, can't stay one place, right? Do you sit at the front of the church, or do you sit closer to the back and you take that 3-year-old outside, every half an hour to let them just go outside, get a little breeze, drink a little water, come in until they get, the developmental stages. They grow a little older and they, develop more discipline to sit a little longer in church, right? So these are practical ways to understand your child's temperament and how to treat with them, right? If you're looking at relationships, right? I'm going to pull one from the Bible. Do you remember Nabal and Abigail? Nabal was bossy. He was mean, harsh, and sometimes we do this. Right? I know that we're all guilty. We're guilty of this. You see a couple and like, how comes the two of them they're together, right?
It's true. You must be blind.
How is it that she stand this guy? It's like he's so bossy and he's so like he takes control. He doesn't take no for an answer. He has to do it now, and she's just so calm and compliant, and she works things out. That's where, as you said earlier, Sister Elephant, where maybe the opposite attracts in that regard,
Yeah, definitely.
So sometimes this works well. You were saying something, Sister Elephant?
No, I'm just listening. It's very interesting.
So sometimes this works so very well with the opposites, but it can also be dangerous. Because sometimes these persons silence. Because after Nabal died, Abigail went off with David.
That's right. That's right.
And it's like sometimes these persons, we speak about opposite attracting, that it doesn't necessarily always work, because sometimes these persons are suppressed. Right? The bossy controlling nature sometimes works well because these persons are great leaders, etc. But the person who is more laid back and easygoing, they could have been more encouraged to become, better leaders. But because of their partners being the leader, they kind of just stand and step back. Right?
So is it your advice then that while you're dating, you should probably have a longer period of dating? Or is it that take the time to so know the person that you can decide for yourself what it is that you are okay with? Should you take advice from those around you, because you may be pulled into his charm and his leadership skills, as you said a while ago. But if you took 2 steps back and realized that yes, though he's this kind of person and that kind of, there's just this aspect that I can't live with, and maybe it's for me and not, it's for somebody else and not for me. Rather than as you see, and you drown.
Right. Sister White tells us to make haste slowly. So, and remember that temperaments are innate. According to Hippocrates, it's innate and you're born with it, you grow up with it, it doesn't change. So while there are aspects that can be modified, and remember also that we're not God. We can't change people. Right? So do not go into a relationship seeing these issues with the temperaments on the negative sides that you cannot handle, hoping to change it. You cannot do that and should not do that. And you never dive in, Patrick, because you know that diving in does first. And
No, look here.
the island, not everybody can swim.
That's
That
right.
is true.
So
But what if I'm already in it? Can I adopt any of these temperament? Can I adopt any of these personalities? You know, I'm already in it, you know, and there's a lot of compromising that have to be made, but can I adopt any of these personalities and temperaments?
remember, remember that Saul became Paul, right? And his temperament really never changed per se, because he still had that zeal and zest that he had when he wanted to kill God's people to now save God's people. His attitude changed.
Right.
And that's where Christ come in. And the crux of all of this temperament is the relationship you have with Christ. That's what it boils down to. And as believers, that's why we have to see that Christ says that through him we can become perfect. Be perfect even as I am perfect.
That's
So
right.
it's for us to acknowledge that every personality, because of sin, we have flaws, right? But in Christ, we can become changed by the renewing of our minds, as Romans, the scripture reminds us. So if we are willing, if you see those flaws that you have, and you're willing to make a change to allow the Holy Spirit to change your mind. Also, that's why in our relationship, whether single parenting, extended, etc., as I mentioned before, marriage, we support each other by seeing each other's shortcomings and not leaving your family member. If it's even your mother or your father, that single parent, that grandfather, you see these little flaws, find ways to reveal it to them, to say, hey, Dad, I noticed that you consistently do this. Pray for these persons as we learn about intercessory prayer and how powerful it is. And we work together.
Miss Francis, one quick question.
Yes.
One quick question before
We wrap up, because we're on the verge of wrapping up now. What if I'm not a Christian and I'm listening to this program now? Does the format still applies even though I'm not a Christian?
The flaw still applies?
The format, does it still apply?
What
even-
format?
Earlier on, I like the part where you say, as Christians, you know, we have to call on God for help in situations like this. All right, but in this case, now, say I'm not a Christian. How? You know,
As a non-Christian, all right, so let me just use one example because of time. As a non-Christian, if you're in marriage, right, the importance of communication, right? So you get married to somebody, you're both non-Christians, this person is sanguine and you're phlegmatic, so to speak. As I said earlier in the program, it's understanding, learning to communicate with your partner, who one is spontaneous, one is more a person who is more strategic and likes time to think. Both of you come together and decide, how are we going to approach certain situations, and how do I want you to modify certain aspects of how you handle with situation based on your temperaments? How can we see eye to eye and meet halfway so that our relationship can work?
Okay, very good, very good, very good.
So Wita, I've learned so much that I'm going to apply to my own family. What about you, Patrick?
I have learned a lot, and I've learned something that I didn't learn now, so I'll be able to learn how to deal with my two at home, and I'm better able now to be a bit more understanding with my wife at home.
Maybe I should not have
Yes.
helped you out with your
And
word
then-
you're
and then
looking
again,
for.
If I know of anyone who is of need or find the situation, then I will have the right advice to give, and not only to give, but to direct them to the right person with the right advice.
Thank you so much, Sister Wita, for joining us today, Sister Wita Francis. We hope that you have learned a lot. She has given us so much for us to apply to our own families.
Right.
And as we come to the end of this segment, I want to implore you to look within not only we tend to look at others, Patrick. So you look at your wife, you look at your husband, you look at your child, your mother, your father, but you don't look at yourself. Take a look at who you are and how you can better improve yourself for your family, how you can work on your weaknesses, Patrick. Because we wouldn't want to say, we don't want to use your areas that are, your growth areas, that term. Those areas that they're not very strong, those areas that you may not like about yourself, others may not like, and how can I improve them? Because as Sister Witter Francis pointed, my favorite text, she made mention of it earlier, was that the Lord will perfect all that concerns you. So where you are weak, Christ will make you strong, and his love covers a multitude of sins. So as we come to the end of this segment, we want to thank you again for joining us. We hope we will see you again in the future.
And you'll join us again.
Thank you for joining us.